Happy Friday. Look at that puppy. Oh no. I see Sharky saying, oh no, Farmos was having some connection issues. Uh-oh. Look at the out of focus puppy. He's kind of been jumping at me. Like, since I sat down, he's been jumping up, going like, treat? Do I get a treat? Hi, Sharkies. Happy Friday. Of course, he gets a treat. Oh, silly boy, out of focus. You want to come up? You want to come up? You want to come up? You want a treat? Okay, come up for a treat. Ben, come on up. Come on. I don't know why he's afraid of like coming up in my lap here. Now he's all nervous, like you're gonna pick me up, aren't you? Here, come get this one. Here, Ben. Come say hi. Come say hi. Oh, how's everybody doing? How's everybody feeling on this fine Friday in April? That didn't really work at all. The 22nd of April, 2022. Farmos and I had a fun day yesterday for Farmos's birthday. We went and had pannenkoeken for breakfast, brunch, at the Dutch. Mixed fruit and whipped cream and big flat pancakes. And then we went over to a hobby shop and got some hobby supplies for presents, as well as a rule book for Farm Mouse. Pannenkoeken and cappuccinos. Yeah, I got a rule book for a game that Farm Mouse has run in the past, but it's been on hiatus for a while. Then we came and took the puppy for a walk. Sharky say, ooh, nice. I do myself like some big old pancakes. Some of the real big flat ones that you kind of roll up to eat. Yeah, we came back and took the puppy for a walk, and then we went out and went to the theater to see a movie. We saw The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent in the VIP theater. Oh, and also before that we went and had dinner. Went out for dinner. Yeah, the Dutch has gluten-free pannenkoeken, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong. I don't remember if I've actually confirmed that. Yeah, we went to Brown's Social House for dinner, and Farmos had some kind of salad bowl thing with lots of like chips, and it was like a Mexi salad bowl or something, wasn't it? And I had fettuccine alfredo with blackened chicken, which was pretty tasty. It was a Southwest bowl. And then yeah, we went and saw The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, which was, I went into it, I knew sort of the basic premise and not much else, and I was pretty entertained from there. If you are unaware of the basic premise, very minor spoiler warning of what the basic premise is it's like Nick Cage plays Nick Cage, and Pedro Pascal plays kind of like a super fan. That's the basic premise, and I don't think I should go any further than that, but it was quite entertaining. You actually haven't heard of it. Yes, it's I don't want to say it's Nick Cage playing himself, because I don't know if that's entirely accurate, because I don't think it's actually supposed to be his personality. I think it's Nick Cage playing a version of himself that, like, yeah, like Farmo says, he plays like a caricature of himself. It's like he is playing this character named Nick Cage, who is an actor and was the star of such films as Con Air and etc., etc., etc. So it's Nick Cage, but I don't think it's really like supposed to be his personality. Like being John Malkovich You know, I saw Being John Malkovich probably when I was too young to see Being John Malkovich. I think I was like 12 or 13. And that was the beginning of my dislike for John Malkovich. I uh I'm not a big John Malkovich fan, and it's probably because the first time I became aware of who he was when I saw that movie when I was too young to see that movie, and as foremost as The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent was very funny. Yeah, maybe if I had seen Being John Malkovich later in life, I would not dislike John Malkovich so much. But I see that he's in a film, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about that. There are some things I've seen him in that were okay, but there were other things where I continue to dislike him. Oh yeah, uh, Unbearable Weight. It was not um, very graphic, but there was swearing and some drug usage. Yeah, and violence, but not like graphic violence. I don't think. I'm pulling up my hair because I feel like I felt something, but I don't think there's actually anything there. And then tomorrow I'm running my D&D game again, which is nice. It hasn't been that long since I ran the last session, so it's nice to have another one so soon. Farmos has her final exam of the semester tomorrow, and then yeah, tomorrow we're doing D&D and gonna have cupcakes, and that should be good. Um, yeah, we'll need to resolve kind of the end of the um, mystery that we started and kind of got most of the way through in the previous session. Um, and both Farmos and I did rapid tests today. I was feeling a little sinusy, but I was like, I'm pretty sure it's just kind of. I get very mild allergies in the spring. You know, like my eyes get a little itchy, my sinus gets a little sore. Um, I don't get like, I probably sneeze a bit more regularly, but but I don't get like severe allergies. But I was kind of feeling that today. Like I woke up with feeling a little, sinusy, and so I thought just to be safe. But um, but yeah, no COVID's here. A very clear negative test. So that's nice. It was also the first COVID test I've actually ever taken myself. Because I've just never had, like, throughout this whole thing, I've never had any symptoms. There was one time where there was the possibility that I'd been in contact with someone who had been in contact with someone who might have had COVID. Like, I was hanging out with someone in the morning who the previous day had been in contact with someone that might have had COVID. So we both kind of isolated ourselves until we found out that that initial person did not have COVID. It was like a 7 degrees of COVID kind of thing. Hey, mini cake, hi. So I've isolated before, but this was the first COVID actual like rapid test or test, the first COVID test I've taken. But so far, no COVIDs for me. Yay. We're all good here. How are you? How's mini cake today? How's Cooper? Is Cooper there? Yes. Farmos was just talking about cupcakes. We were just talking about. Let's see. Did I miss something? Oh yes, the COVID tests are unpleasant. Yeah, Cooper's good. That's good. Well, now that we're talking about him. Oh, hey, puppy. He's sleeping. All right, I won't wake him up then. But I'm tempted. Yeah, the COVID test was very unpleasant. Sticking the thing way up, giving yourself the old brain swab. But it's nice to um, look at that test and see the negative result and be like, ah, I do not have COVID. Farmo says, I have never met your dog, but I love him. Yeah, yeah, that's accurate. You're gonna need to figure out. You need to post a picture of Cooper online somewhere, and then give us a link so that we can all look at your pup. Yeah, we were just talking about. He loves everybody. Oh, that's so cute. Benabik likes most people and most dogs, but he gets nervous sometimes, and he isn't a big fan of small kids. Um, Anyone that is young enough that they're still quite small makes him nervous. Oh, and now he's left. He's like, oh no, he's talking about kids. I gotta go. Farmo says, I love pretty much all dogs I'm aware of, but especially ones who like me. You gonna do it? You gonna let us see your dog? I hope so. Yeah, he gets a little nervous about little children. Um, I think it's something to do with like how they look like adults, which he's used to, but they're different, and then they move a little weird, and they make too much eye contact, and sometimes they want to kind of come towards him. I think all of that combined makes him a little nervous. Yeah, so that's how yesterday went. Food and hobby store and movie. It was all fun. Good day. And then D&D Dungeons and or Dragons tomorrow. D and or D. And yeah, we'll see. There's still some unresolved issues to take care of in the village of Barovia. Chucky say kids tend to flip out a bit more. Yeah. Well, and kids haven't like there are safer methods of approaching dogs, right? You don't want to bend over right in their face. You don't want to reach down from above too much. Um, some dogs are better for with that than others. Like some dogs just don't care, but with dogs that are more skittish, right? You kind of want to crouch down a little bit from further away and offer them your hand from below for them to sniff first, right? Kids don't know all of that stuff. Kids want to rush in and like touch the dog. Pharma says the manual I got was for a superhero game. We were using a different system, but it wasn't working super well, so I'm trying to convert the characters to this easier to use one. Yeah. Yeah, we were playing Pharmos was running a game in a system called Heroes Unlimited, which is based on the Palladium system of like Rifts rules, kind of. There's a whole Rifts universe, and then there's sort of like a fantasy version of that, which is based on the same rule set, and like a modern version of it, which is based on the same rule set, and then like on top of the modern version, because the basic Rift system is kind of sci-fi. You got like mech pilots and things in space and all sorts of stuff out there. Um, and then on top of the modern system, less sci-fi, is the heroes version, the superhero version. Oh dear. Chucky's have one of the kids has had a tussle with a pup. Yeah, it's tricky, but hopefully everybody's okay in the end. But yeah, so the Heroes Unlimited system, it was fun. It like what it did have was a massive list of different powers that your characters could have, different like superpowers and things. Um, like in theory, you could make I don't know just about any superhero that you've seen in a comic um, through some combination of powers, and then probably quite a few beyond that. But the system itself, like the powers were interesting, but the system itself didn't give you a lot of leeway for like using your powers in creative ways. Um, and like the combat was kind of clunky because it wasn't really designed as a superhero system first. It was like, I think it was originally designed as the fantasy, like as a D&D equivalent, and then kind of expanded into the Rifts system, which is more sci-fi. So as an example, we had to like homebrew or look up other people's homebrew a rule for knocking people unconscious instead of killing them, because the default system was like once you ran out of hit points you were dead. And so it's like, this is a superhero game, we're not playing like anti-heroes really. There are going to be times where we're just going to want to knock our opponents unconscious, and the game, like by default, didn't cover that. I think we just ended up settling on like, as long as you're not doing it with like a fire blast or something like that. If you're fighting someone and they drop to 0, you get to choose whether you're being lethal or non-lethal. So it was kind of awkward in a lot of ways like that. There was a lot of sort of and on top of that, it was very complex to play. Like there are a billion different skills for like code breaking and piloting boats and like lock picking and pocket picking and seduction, and like every different weapon had its own skill. Like rifles had a different skill versus like pistols, and archery had its own skill, and melee weapons were their own skill, and like there were a bunch of different unarmed combat styles and things like that. Like it was a very bloated system, and I'm sure you could probably cut a lot of that out, but it felt awkward to use the system. So this new system that we're going to be trying, that Farmhouse is going to try, is called Mutants and Masterminds. And it seems a lot more streamlined. I think it does kind of require a little more improvisation in the rules. A little more like leeway. I don't know, like what am I trying to say? Like you kind of maybe need to fill in some gaps on your own, but it's like designed to let you do that. Pharma says it's got fewer but broader rules. Yeah. And yeah, like you were saying, lends itself more to creative play. Our characters in that game are fun that we've been playing. It's been a long break. I think we haven't played for like 2 years. But we've got a group of 4 superheroes, right? There's 4 of us, I think. We've got a guy who, like, everybody sort of gained their powers on the same day, or like learned about them on the same day. So we've got one guy who is like, he's he's a PI or an ex-PI, I'm not sure. I don't remember. And he can change from a human into a robot, and then from being a robot he can transform into other machinery that he's like come in contact with. He can become a vehicle or something like that. He's sort of like an omni transformer, but he can turn back and forth between human and robot, which is sort of interesting. We've got a girl who was a paramedic who can transform into rocks. She can go from human into like animated pebbles and stones and things, and she can fire those off or fit through small spaces as like a stream of gravel, or move quickly on like almost like improvised roller skates, things like that. We've got a shadow manipulator. He can like cloak himself in shadow to be sneaky, or he can make barriers out of shadow. He has like shadow blasts, or he can like bind someone up in their own shadow so that they can't move. Things like that. So he's had some interest. There was one time where we were all like jumping out of a helicopter or something. None of us had parachutes, and he just made these like layers of shadow for us to fall through that all like slowed us down as we fell. So we were kind of like passing through this like darkness that was like binding us up and making us slow down so that we were safe when we hit the ground. That was interesting. And then my character is this like teenager named Tim, who is just very strong. Like he's sort of got the super strength power. He doesn't look strong, but he's like scrawny, but he's strong, and he can make these like floating energy orbs that kind of are like a delayed blast kind of thing. So there was one time where we were in a car chase. Someone was pursuing us as we escaped from this area, and so I just kind of leaned out of our vehicle, which I think was the other character, the Transformer, and I was dropping these little explosives at tire height, and then the car behind us hit those, and it, hit the tires and blew up the tires. So that was fun. Pharma says, we started the game with the players not knowing the style of game, and then gave them character sheets with their powers in the first session. Yeah, I think everyone kind of went in sort of assuming that it was going to be like D&D or D&D Modern. Something like that. Or just, yeah, like a modern campaign, and then it turned out to be like a superhero game. It's in like a slightly alternative Earth, kind of like I suppose more like DC. I guess like DC or Marvel, but I'd say more like DC, where DC has not all of the normal cities, right? DC's got Gotham and Metropolis and things like that. So it's sort of like that, but it's, we went like, we had a shopping trip in a Walmart where we were trying to get supplies on a budget at one point. But it's like, the world's like primary search engine is Bing and things like that. There's just, we make jokes about stuff like that, and our characters get bogged down in like arguments and semantics a lot. There have been a lot of times where we're in the middle of something serious and we get into an argument over like some completely worthless thing, or a superhero organization was trying to recruit us at one point, and we like got into a whole thing where we were trying to negotiate our contracts and what's our health plan like and things like that. It just turned into this whole argument about what's our working conditions going to be, who's taking care of us. So that was pretty funny. I'm looking forward to getting back to that game. It's been a while. Well, I've rambled on about role-playing games for 20 minutes, so why don't we talk about this book? Hey, Wyrd Sisters, we read the first 16 pages last time. We met a variety of characters. We had our first look at Granny Weatherwax, Nanny Og, and Magrat Garlic, right. We also met the ghost of King Verence of Lancre. We never actually met him while he was alive. The first time we were introduced to him, he was already stabbed in the back and fallen down some stairs. And we kind of met his baby son, his young infant son, who got whisked away from the castle by a loyal soldier, I guess, pursued by 3 traitorous soldiers, one of whom ended up getting stabbed in the back by one of the others after kind of getting frightened by Granny Weatherwax. And we met Death, who was not terribly impressed with the circumstances of the King Verence of Lancre, because he didn't fully know what was going on and kind of found out on the fly. So yeah, that was fun. I'm both looking forward to reading more of this book, but I'm also missing Garion. When I was getting ready to do the stream, I was like thinking about what we were reading, and I went like, wonder what Garion's up to. But I am looking forward to reading more of this because it is very entertaining. Yeah. So why don't we get into it? Everybody ready? Ready, ready? Ready, steady? Ready, Freddy? Ready, other things that rhyme with ready? Sharkies wonder how Death was consulting Destiny to learn that Varence was to be a ghost. Yeah, there seemed to be a bit there where Death was like listening and like paused and then got all grumbly about it. Oh, and of course we also met the ghost of King Champot of Lancre. Um, Possibly the first king of Lancre? The one that built the castle, anyways. Fantasy Bluetooth? Yeah. Something like that, yeah. What does your cover art look like, Sharkies? What version of the book do you have? Are you also at the top of page 17? Because where I finished, we finished page 16, and that's where we ended. Alright, well, I'm going to get into it. Of course, as previously mentioned, there are not chapters in this book. There are occasional breaks. So I can't say that we're, starting chapter 2 or anything like that. But we are starting page 17 anyways. Where we left off was the ghost of King Varence very sadly regretting dying because he really misses food. You're on page 24. Oh, all right. Oh, you bought it new. Very nice. It's nice that you were able to find a new copy. I mean, not that, Terry Pratchett is still very popular. But there are so many Pratchett books that I would have to wonder what individual bookstores are going to be carrying, which ones. Because this is definitely one of the older Discworld books. But, because I think Equal Rights was the first Discworld book to not have Rincewind as its primary protagonist. Rincewind is the one that this hat belongs to. I leaned forward and now I'm out of focus. Most of your Pratchett are used, but this one I'm pretty sure got new in you. Oh, when I see. Right. Equal Rights was, I think, the first non-Rincewind Discworld book. And then there were probably a couple books in between that and this one. I think Sharkies thinks Equal Rights is the third book. Oh, and Farmos is agreeing. Color of Magic, Light Fantastic, then Equal Rights. Alright. Page 17. A damp dawn flooded across the landscape, scaled the battlements of Lancre Castle, stormed the keep, and finally made it through the casement of the solar. He loves describing the way light moves in the Discworld. Duke Felmet stared out gloomily at the dripping forest. There was such a lot of it. It wasn't, he decided, that he had anything against trees as such. It was just that the sight of so much of them was terribly depressing. He kept wanting to count them. Indeed, my love, he said. The Duke put those who met him in mind of some sort of lizard, possibly the type that lives on volcanic islands, moves once a day, has a vestigial third eye, and blinks on a monthly basis. He considered himself to be a civilized man, more suited to the dry air and bright sun of a properly organized climate. On the other hand, he mused, it might be nice to be a tree. Trees didn't have ears, he was pretty sure of this. And they seemed to manage without the blessed state of matrimony. Oh boy. We got ourselves a boomer. A male oak tree, he'd have to look this up. A male oak tree just shed its pollen on the breeze, and all the business with the acorns, unless it was oak apples. And no, he was pretty sure it was acorns. It took place somewhere else. Yes, my precious, he said. There is a yappy dog outside somewhere, like barking up a storm. Yes, trees had got it all worked out. Duke Felmet glared at the forest roof. Selfish bastards. Certainly, my dear, he said. What? Said the Duchess. The Duke hesitated, desperately trying to replay the monologue of the last 5 minutes. There had been something about him being half a man and infirm on purpose, and he was sure there had been a complaint about the coldness of the castle. The yappy dog is getting closer. Oh, and now I hear the yappy dog's owners. Oh, and now Benedict hears the yappy dog. Or the yappy dog's owners. He tends to react to hearing people outside more so than hearing dogs. Carmo says, sounds like Mimi. She hates Ben. I'm distracted by a dog outside. Alright, focus, Sleep, focus. Little angry chihuahua. Yes. He was sure there had been a complaint about the coldness of the castle. Yes, that was probably it. Well, those wretched trees could do a decent day's work for once. I'll have some cut down and brought in directly, my cherished, he said. Lady Falmet was momentarily speechless. This was by way of being a calendar event. She was a large and impressive woman who gave people confronting her for the first time the impression that they were seeing a galleon under full sail. Reminiscent of Lady Ramkin, perhaps. Though I don't know whether or not their personalities are going to match up. The yappy dog could be a good name for a tavern or a dog treat truck. A dog treat truck. Is that like an ice cream truck but for dogs? I don't think I could run one of those because I would go out of business. Every dog that ran up, I'd be like, oh, what do you got there? A leaf? Here's your treats. And I wouldn't be able to afford any more treats or fuel for my truck. The effect was heightened by her unfortunate belief that red velvet rather suited her. However, it didn't set off her complexion. It matched it. The Duke often mused on his good luck in marrying her. If it wasn't for the engine of her ambition, he'd be just another local lord, with nothing much to do but hunt, drink, and exercise his droit de seigneur, asterisk. Oh good, we got a footnote for that. I get the feeling that with Lady Felmet here, we got a certain Lady M situation. Alright, footnote. Droit de seigneur. Whatever that was, he'd never found anyone prepared to explain it to him. But it was definitely something a feudal lord ought to have, and he was pretty sure it needed regular exercise. He imagined it was some kind of large, hairy dog. He was definitely going to get one, and damn well exercise it. End of footnote. Instead, he was now just a step away from the throne, and might soon be monarch of all he surveyed, provided that all he surveyed was trees. He sighed. "Cut what down?" said Lady Felmet icily. "Oh, the trees," said the Duke. "What have trees got to do with it?" "Well, there are such a lot of them," said the Duke with feeling. "Don't change the subject." "Sorry, my sweet." "What I said was, how could you have been so stupid as to let them get away? I told you that servant was far too loyal. You can't trust someone like that." "No, my love." "You didn't by chance consider sending someone after them, I suppose?" "Bentzon, my dear, and a couple of guards." "Oh." The Duchess paused. Bentzon, as captain of the Duke's personal bodyguard, was as efficient a killer as a psychotic mongoose. He would have been her choice. It annoyed her to be temporarily deprived of a chance to fault her husband, but she rallied quite well. "He wouldn't have needed to go out at all if only you'd listened to me. But you never do." "Do what, my passion?" Womp womp. The Duke yawned. It had been a long night. There had been a thunderstorm of quite unnecessarily dramatic proportions. Yeah, we heard all about that. And then there had been all that messy business with the knives. It has already been mentioned that Duke Felmet was one step away from the throne. The step in question was at the top of the flight leading to the Great Hall, down which King Verence had tumbled in the dark, only to land, against all laws of probability, on his own dagger. It had, however, been declared by his own physician to be a case of natural causes. Bentzon had gone to see the man and explained that falling down a flight of steps with a dagger in your back was a disease caused by unwise opening of the mouth. Sharky's saying, if my doggy treat truck ran on leaves, I'd be set. Like if it was Mr. Fusion or something like that. Yeah, toss in an orange peel, whatever the dogs want to bring up in exchange for treats. Alright, well, once they come up with an affordable Mr. Fusion, this doggy treat truck business is going straight to the roads. Or where it's going, we won't need roads. In fact, it had already been caught by several members of the king's own bodyguard, who had been a little bit hard of hearing. Oh, the disease caught by the unwise opening of the mouth. There had been a minor epidemic. Doc Brown in retirement. The Duke shuddered. There were details about last night that were both hazy and horrible. He tried to reassure himself that all the unpleasantness was over now, and he had a kingdom. It wasn't much of one, apparently being mainly trees, but it was a kingdom, and it had a crown. If only they could find it. Lancre Castle was built on an outcrop of rock by an architect who had heard about Gormenghast, but hadn't got the budget. He'd done his best, though, with a tiny confection of cut-price turrets, bargain basements, buttresses, crenellations, gargoyles, towers, courtyards, keeps, and dungeons. In fact, just about everything a castle needs. except maybe reasonable foundations and the kind of mortar that doesn't wash away in a light shower. The castle leaned vertiginously vertiginously, vertiginously, defined as something a castle does, to do with leaning. The castle leaned vertiginously over the racing white water of the Lanker River, which boomed darkly 1,000 feet below. Every now and again, a few bits fell in. Ah, Farmo says, causing vertigo. I wonder if I'm pronouncing it. Should it be vertiginously? No, probably not. It's probably vertiginously. Probably. 1,000 feet above. It kind of reminds me of Castle Ravenloft, except much cheaper. Small as it was, though, the castle contained 1,000 places to hide a crown. The Duchess swept out to find someone else to berate, and left Lord Felmet looking gloomily at the landscape. It started to rain. It was on this cue that there came a thunderous knocking at the castle door. It seriously disturbed the castle porter, who was playing Cripple Mr. Onion with the castle cook and the castle's fool in the warmth of the kitchen. This is not the last time we're going to hear about Cripple Mr. Onion. He growled and stood up. "There is a knocking without," he said. "Without what?" said the fool. "Without the door, idiot." The fool gave him a worried look. "A knocking without a door?" he said suspiciously. "This isn't some kind of Zen, is it?" I saw that there was a fool. I figured I had to go for the King Candy kind of voice. What am I supposed to do? It's either that or the really deadpan sad clown. Don Knotts. What should I stick with this for the fool, or should I go for the sad clown? It's got to be one of the two, right? When the porter had grumbled off in the direction of the gatehouse, the cook pushed another farthing into the kitty and looked sharply over his cards at the fool. "What's a Zen?" he said. The fool's bells tinkled as he sorted through his cards. Without thinking, he said, "Oh, a subsect of the turnwise Clatch philosophical system of Sumton, noted for its simple austerity and the offer of personal tranquility and wholeness achieved through meditation and breathing techniques. An interesting aspect is the asking of apparently nonsensical questions in order to widen the doors of perception." "How's that again?" said the cook suspiciously. He was on edge. When he'd taken the breakfast up to the great hall, he'd kept getting the feeling that something was trying to take the tray out of his hands. And as if that wasn't bad enough, this new Duke had sent him back for, he shuddered, oatmeal and a runny boiled egg. The cook was too old for this sort of thing. He was set in his ways. He was a cook in the real feudal tradition. If it didn't have an apple in its mouth and you couldn't roast it, he didn't want to serve it. The fool hesitated with a card in his hand, suppressed his panic, and thought quickly. "I'faith, nuncle," he squeaked, "thou'rt more full of questions than a martleberry is full of mizzen sails." The cook relaxed. Well, okay, he said, not entirely satisfied. The fool lost the next 3 hands, just to be on the safe side. You know, I figured I would give the whole philosophical thing a run for the money, just plow through it with that voice. It wasn't easy. The porter, meanwhile, unfastened the hatch in the wicket gate and peered out. "Who dost knock without?" he growled. Sharkies like it. Somebody gotta clip that monologue. There's a way to save a section. Just clip that. The soldier, drenched and terrified though he was, hesitated. Without? Without what? He said. If you're going to bugger about, you can bloody well stay without all day, said the porter calmly. No! I must see the Duke upon the instant, shouted the guard. Witches are abroad! The porter was about to come back with, Good time of year for it, or Wish I was too, but stopped when he saw the man's face. It wasn't the face of a man who would enter into the spirit of the thing. It was the look of someone who had seen things a decent man shouldn't wot of. This book... Witches? Said Lord Felmet. Witches! Said the Duchess. In the drafty corridors, a voice as faint as the wind in distant keyholes said, with a note of hope, Witches! The psychically inclined... ... It's meddling. That's not quite right. It's meddling. That's what it is, said Granny Weatherwax, and no good will come of it. It's very romantic, said Magrat breathily, and heaved a sigh. Goochie go, said Nanny Og. Maybe. Anyway, said Magrat, you killed that horrid man. I never did. I just encouraged things to take their course. Granny Weatherwax frowned. He didn't have no respect. Once people lose their respect, it means trouble. Is he wussy-wassy, then? That other man brought him out here to save him, shouted Magrat. He wanted us to keep him safe. It's obvious. It's destiny. Oh, obvious, said Granny. I'll grant you it's obvious. Trouble is, just because things are obvious doesn't mean they're true. She weighed the crown in her hands. It felt very heavy, in a way that went beyond mere pounds and ounces. Yes, but the point is, Magrat began. The point is, said Granny, that people are going to come looking. Serious people, serious looking. Pull down the walls and burn off the thatch looking. And, how's a boy, Dan? And, Githa, I'm sure we'll all be a lot happier if you'd stop gurgling like that, Granny snapped. She could feel her nerves coming on. Her nerves always played up when she was unsure about things. Besides, they had retired to Magrat's cottage, and the decor was getting to her, because Magrat believed in nature's wisdom and elves and the healing power of colors and the cycle of the seasons and a lot of other things Granny Weatherwax didn't have any truck with. You're not after telling me to how to look after a child, snapped Nanny Og mildly. And me with 15 of my own. How's that for Nanny Og? Am I doing okay? Does it need work? Adjustment? Notes, suggestions, comments, critiques? Ramos likes this better than last week, or last Wednesday, last week, 2 days ago. Jollier, she's peeved here. She's upset with Granny. I'm just saying that we ought to think about it, said Granny. The other two watched her for some time. Well, said Magrat. Granny's fingers drummed on the edge of the crown. She frowned. First, we've got to take him away from here, she said, and held up a hand. No, Githa, I'm sure your cottage is ideal and everything, but it's not safe. He's got to be somewhere away from here, a long way away, where no one knows who he is. And then there's this. She tossed the crown from hand to hand. Oh, that's easy, said Magrat. I mean, you just hide it under a stone or something. That's easy. Much easier than babies. It ain't, said Granny. The reason being, the country's full of babies and they all look the same. But I don't reckon there's many crowns. They have this way of being found anyway. They kind of call out to people's minds. If you bunged it under a stone up here, in a week's time it'd get itself discovered by accident. You mark my words. It's like the ring, the one ring. Noggy. It's true, is that? Said Nanny Og earnestly. How many times have you thrown a magic ring? Dang it! Why does this keep happening? I say something, and then moments later it gets addressed. We went to see the movie last night, and there was a really weird trailer for something, or a commercial or something like that. And then this other commercial started with some model, and I was like, okay. And then the model goes, okay. And I was like, ah! Sharkies were about to say it's like the One Ring. Yeah. Because Pratchett is always 5 steps ahead of everyone. Yeah, that's probably, I mean, in this case, that's how it is. It's not that it's anything to do with me. It's that the question, you know, the assumption, the link gets made in the book and then addressed. So I notice the link and then it gets addressed. But it just feels like it's happening a lot and not just with books. Okay. It's true, is that? Said Nanny Og earnestly. How many times have you thrown a magic ring into the deepest depths of the ocean, and then, when you get home and have a nice bit of turbo for your turbot, T-U-R-B-O-T. I don't know what that is. Turbot for your tea, there it is. They considered this in silence. Never, said Granny irritably, and nor have you. Anyway, he might want it back. If it's rightfully his, that is. Kings set a lot of store by crowns. Really, Githa, sometimes you say the most... I'll just make some tea, shall I? Said Magrat brightly, and disappeared into the scullery. The two elderly witches sat on either side of the table in polite and prickly silence. Finally, Nanny Og said, She done it up nice, hasn't she? Flowers and everything. What are them things on the walls? Sigils, said Granny sourly, or some such. Fancy, said Nanny Og politely. And all them robes and wands and things, too. Modern, said Granny Weatherwax with a sniff. "When I was a gel, we had a lump of wax and a couple of pins and had to be content. We had to make our own enchantment in them days."
"Ah, well, we've all passed a lot of water since then," said Nanny Ogg sagely.
She gave the baby a comforting jiggle. Granny Weatherwax sniffed. Nanny Ogg had been married 3 times and ruled a tribe of children and grandchildren all over the kingdom. Certainly, it was not actually forbidden for witches to get married. Granny had to concede that, but reluctantly. Very reluctantly. She sniffed again, disapprovingly. This was a mistake. "What's that smell?" she snapped.
"Ah,"
said Nanny Ogg, carefully repositioning the baby.
"I expect I'll just go and see if Margaret has any clean rags, shall I?"
And now Granny was left alone. She felt embarrassed, as one always does when left alone in someone else's room, and fought the urge to get up and inspect the books on the shelf over the sideboard or examine the mantelpiece for dust. She turned the crown around and around in her hands. Again, it gave the impression of being bigger and heavier than it actually was. She caught sight of the mirror over the mantelpiece and looked down at the crown. It was tempting. It was practically begging her to try it for size. Well, and why not? She made sure that the others weren't around, and then, in one movement, whipped off her hat and placed the crown on her head. It seemed to fit. We were talking about the One Ring. Granny drew herself up proudly and waved a hand imperiously in the general direction of the hearth. "Jolly well, do this," she said. She beckoned arrogantly at the grandfather clock. "Chop his head off, what ho!" she commanded. She smiled grimly and froze as she heard the screams and the thunder of horses and the deadly whisper of arrows and the damp, solid sound of spears in flesh. Charge after charge echoed across her skull. Sword met shield, or sword, or bone, relentlessly. Years streamed across her mind in the space of a second. There were times when she lay among the dead, or hanging from the branch of a tree, but always there were hands that would pick her up again and place her on a velvet cushion. Granny very carefully lifted the crown off her head. It was an effort, it didn't like it much, and laid it on the table. "So, that's being a king for you, is it?" she said softly. "I wonder why they all want the job." "Do you take sugar?" said Magrat behind her. "You'd have to be a born fool to be a king," said Granny. "Sorry." Granny turned. "Didn't see you come in," she said. "What was it you said?" "Sugar in your tea." "3 spoons," said Granny promptly. It was one of the few sorrows of Granny Weatherwax's life that, despite all her efforts, she'd arrived at the peak of her career with a complexion like a rosy apple and all her teeth. No amount of charms could persuade a wart to take root on her handsome, if slightly equine features, and vast intakes of sugar only served to give her boundless energy. A wizard she'd consulted had explained it was on account of her having a metabolism, which at least allowed her to feel vaguely superior to Nanny Ogg, who she suspected had never even seen one. Magrat dutifully dug out 3 heaped ones. It would be nice,
she thought wistfully. If someone could say thank you occasionally. She became aware that the crown was staring at her. "You can feel it, can you?" said Granny. It said, "Didn't it said, didn't I? Crowns call out." "It's horrible." "No, no. It's just being what it is. It can't help it." "But it's magic." "It's just being what it is," Granny repeated. "It's trying to get me to try it on," said Magrat, her hand hovering. "It does that, yes." "But I shall be strong," said Magrat. "So I should think," said Granny, her expression suddenly curiously wooden. "What's Githa doing?" "She's giving the baby a wash in the sink," said Magrat vaguely. "How can we hide something like this? What'd happen if we buried it really deeply somewhere?" "A badger'd dig it up," said Granny wearily. "Or someone'd go prospecting for gold or something. Or a tree'd tangle its roots around it and then be blown over in a storm, and then someone'd pick it up and put it on." "Unless they were as strong-minded as us," Magrat pointed out. "Unless that, of course," said Granny, staring at her fingernails. "Though the thing with crowns is, it isn't the putting them on that's the problem. It's the taking them off." Magrat picked it up and turned it over in her hands. "It's not as though it even looks much like a crown," she said. "You've seen a lot, I expect," said Granny. "You'd be an expert on them, naturally." "Seen a fair few. They've got a lot more jewels on them, and cloth bits in the middle," said Magrat defiantly. "This is just a thin little thing."
"Magrat Garlic!"
"I have. When I was being trained up by Goody Whemper,
may she rest in peace,
may she rest in peace, she used to take me over to Razorback or into Lancre whenever the strolling players were in town. She was very keen on the theatre. They've got more crowns than you can shake a stick at, although, mind," she paused, "Goody did say they're made of tin and paper and stuff, and just glass for the jewels, but they look more realer than this one. Do you think that's strange?"
"Things that try to look like things often do look more like things than things. Well-known fact," said Granny. "But I don't hold with encouraging it. What do they stroll about playing, then, in these crowns?"
"You don't know about the theatre?" said Magrat. Granny Weatherwax, who never declared her ignorance of anything, didn't hesitate.
"Oh, yes," she said. "It's one of them style of things, then, is it?"
"Goody Whemper said it held a mirror up to life," said Magrat. "She said it always cheered her up."
"I expect it would," said Granny, striking out. "Played properly, at any rate. Good people, are they, these theatre players?"
"I think so."
"And they stroll around the country, you say?"
said Granny thoughtfully, looking toward the scullery door. "All over the place. There's a troupe in Lancre now, I heard. I haven't been because, you know." Magrat looked down. "'Tis not right, a woman going into such places by herself." Granny nodded. She thoroughly approved of such sentiments, so long as there was, of course, no suggestion that they applied to her. She drummed her fingers on Magrat's tablecloth.
"Right," she said. "And why not? Go and tell Githa to wrap the baby up.
It's a long time since I heard a theatre played properly.
Sharky say, the cup of a carpenter.
Magrat was entranced, as usual. The theatre was no more than some lengths of painted sacking, a plank stage laid over a few barrels, and a half-dozen benches set out in the village square. But, at the same time, it had also managed to become the castle, another part of the castle, the same part a little later, the battlefield, and now it was a road outside the city. The afternoon would have been perfect if it wasn't for Granny Weatherwax. After several piercing glares at the three-man orchestra to see if she could work out which instrument the theatre was, the old witch had finally paid attention to the stage, and it was beginning to become apparent to Magrat that there were certain fundamental aspects of the theatre that Granny had not yet grasped. She was currently bouncing up and down on her stool with rage. "He's killed him," she hissed. "Why isn't anyone doing anything about it? He's killed him, and right up there in front of everyone." Magrat held on desperately to her colleague's arm as she struggled to get to her feet. "It's all right," she whispered. "He's not dead." "Are you calling me a liar, my girl?" snapped Granny. "I saw it all." "Look, Granny, it's not really real, do you see?" Granny Weatherwax subsided a little, but still grumbled under her breath. She was beginning to feel that things were trying to make a fool of her. Up on the stage, a man in a sheet was giving a spirited monologue. Granny listened intently for some minutes, and then nudged Magrat in the ribs. "What's he on about now?" she demanded. "He's saying how sorry he was that the other man's dead," said Magrat, and in an attempt to change the subject, added hurriedly, "There's a lot of crowns, isn't there?" Granny was not to be distracted. "What did he go and kill him for, then?" she said. "Well, it's a bit complicated," said Magrat weakly. "It's shameful," snapped Granny. "And the poor dead thing still lying there." Magrat gave an imploring look to Nanny Ogg, who was masticating an apple and studying the stage with the glare of a research scientist. "I reckon," she said slowly, "I reckon it's all just pretending. Look, he's still breathing." The rest of the audience, who by now had already decided that this commentary was all part of the play, stared as one man at the corpse. It blushed. "And look at his boots, too," said Nanny critically. "A real king'd be ashamed of boots like that." The corpse tried to shuffle its feet behind a cardboard bush. Granny, feeling in some obscure way that they had scored a minor triumph over the purveyors of untruth and artifice, helped herself to an apple from the bag and began to take a fresh interest. Magrat's nerves started to unknot, and she began to settle down to enjoy the play. But not, as it turned out, for very long. Her willing suspension of disbelief was interrupted by a voice saying, "What's this bit?" Magrat sighed. "Well," she hazarded, "he thinks that he is the prince, but he's really the other king's daughter, dressed up as a man." Granny subjected the actor to a long, analytical stare. "He is a man," she said, "in a straw wig, making his voice squeaky." Magrat shuddered. She knew a little about the conventions of the theater. She had been dreading this bit. Granny Weatherwax had views. Yes, but, she said wretchedly, it's the theater, see? All the women are played by men.
Why?
They don't allow no women on the stage, said Magrat in a small voice. She shut her eyes. In fact, there was no outburst from the seat on her left. She risked a quick glance. Granny was quietly chewing the same bit of apple over and over again, her eyes never leaving the action. Don't make a fuss, Esme, said Nanny, who also knew about Granny's views. This is a good bit. I reckon I'm getting the hang of it. Someone tapped Granny on the shoulder, and a voice said, Madam, will you kindly remove your hat? Granny turned around very slowly on her stool, as though propelled by hidden motors, and subjected the interrupter to a 100-kilowatt diamond blue stare. The man wilted under it and sagged back onto his stool, her face following him all the way down. No, she said. He considered the options. All right, he said. Granny turned back and nodded to the actors, who had paused to watch her. I don't know what you're staring at, she growled. Get on with it. Nanny Ogg passed her another bag. Have a humbug, she said. Silence again filled the makeshift theater, except for the hesitant voices of the actors, who kept glancing at the bristling figure of Granny Weatherwax, and the sucking sounds of a couple of boiled humbugs being relentlessly churned from cheek to cheek. Then Granny said, in a piercing voice that made one actor drop his wooden sword, There's a man over on the side there, whispering to them. He's a prompter, said Magrat. He tells them what to say. Don't they know? I think they're forgetting, said Magrat sourly. For some reason. Granny nudged Nanny Ogg. What's going on now? She said. Why are all them kings and people up there? It's a banquet, see? Said Nanny Ogg authoritatively. Because of the dead king, him in the boots, as was. Only now, if you look, you'll see he's pretending to be a soldier. Everyone's making speeches about how good he was and wondering who killed him. Are they? Said Granny grimly. She cast her eyes along the cast, looking for the murderer. She was making up her mind. Then she stood up. Her black shawl billowed around her like the wings of an avenging angel, come to rid the world of all that was foolishness and pretense and artifice and sham. She seemed somehow a lot bigger than normal. She pointed an angry finger at the guilty party. He done it, she shouted triumphantly. We all seed him. He done it with a dagger. The audience piled out, contented. It had been a good play on the whole, they decided, although not very easy to follow. But it had been a jolly good laugh when all the kings had run off, and the woman in black had jumped up and did all the shouting. That alone had been well worth the halfpenny admission. The three witches sat alone on the edge of the stage. I wonder how they get all them kings and lords to come here and do this, said Granny, totally unabashed. I'd have thought they'd been too busy, ruling and similar. No, said Magrat wearily. I still don't think you quite understand. Well, I'm going to get to the bottom of it, snapped Granny. She got back onto the stage and pulled aside the sacking curtains. You, she shouted, you're dead. The luckless former corpse, who was eating a ham sandwich to calm his nerves, ham, fell backward off his stool. Granny kicked a bush. Her foot went right through it. See, she said to the world in general in a strangely satisfied voice. Nothing's real. It's all just paint and sticks and paper at the back. May I assist you, good ladies? It was a rich and wonderful voice, with every diphthong gliding beautifully into place. It was a golden brown voice. If the creator of the multiverse had a voice, it was a voice such as this. I feel like I'm flattering myself here. If it had a drawback, it was that it wasn't a voice you could use, for example, for ordering coal. Coal ordered by this voice would become diamonds. It apparently belonged to a large fat man who had been badly savaged by a mustache. One of those sentences where I didn't realize what was happening until I was reading it out loud. That caught me a little by surprise. Chucky say, like saying he'd be handsome if it weren't for his face. Something like that. Badly savaged by a mustache. That's a good one. I feel like I need to remember that one. There are situations where I could use that. Wow. That one got me. It apparently belonged to a large fat man who had been badly savaged by a mustache. Pink veins made a map of his quite a large city. Pink veins made a map of quite a large city on his cheeks. His nose could have hidden successfully in a bowl of strawberries. He wore a ragged jerkin and holey tights with an aplomb that nearly convinced you that his velvet and vermine robes were in the wash just at the moment. In one hand he held a towel, with which he had clearly been removing the makeup that still greased his features. I know you, said Granny. You done the murder. She looked sideways at Magrat, and admitted grudgingly, leastways, it looked like it. So glad. It is always a pleasure to meet a true connoisseur. Olwyn Vittler, at your service. Manager of this band of vagabonds, said the man, and, removing his moth-eaten hat, he treated her to a low bow. It was less an obeisance than an exercise in advanced topology. The hat swerved and jerked through a series of complex arcs, ending up at the end of an arm which was now pointing in the direction of the sky. One of his legs, meanwhile, had wandered off behind him. The rest of his body sagged politely until his head was level with Granny's knees. Yes, well, said Granny. She felt that her clothes had grown a bit larger and much hotter. I thought you was very good, too, said Nanny Og. The way you shouted all them words so graciously. I could tell you was a king. I hope we didn't upset things, said Magrat. My dear lady, said Vittler, could I begin to tell you how gratifying it is for a mere mummer to learn that his audience has seen behind the mere shell of grease paint to the spirit beneath? I expect you could, said Granny. I expect you could say anything, Mr. Vitteler. He replaced his hat, and their eyes met in the long and calculating stare of one professional weighing up another. Vitteler broke first, and tried to pretend he hadn't been competing. And now, he said, to what do I owe this visit from 3 such charming ladies? In fact, he'd won. Granny's mouth fell open. She would not have described herself as anything much above handsome, considering. Nanny, on the other hand, was as gummy as a baby, and had a face like a small dried raisin. The best you could say for Magrat was that she was decently plain and well scrubbed, and as flat-chested as an ironing board with a couple of peas on it, even if her head was too well stuffed with fancies. It was harsh. Maybe, whatever. Granny could feel something, some sort of magic at work, but not the kind she was used to. It was Vitteler's voice. By the mere process of articulation, it transformed everything it talked about. Look at the two of them, she told herself, primping away like a couple of ninnies. Granny stopped her hand in the process of patting her own iron-hard bun, and cleared her throat meaningfully. Sharky say, that'd be charm. Yes, this fellow's got a high charisma score. It's an interesting... He is not described physically very flatteringly. And this is something that I feel like would be tricky to come across in, like, some game systems terms. Because some game systems kind of use charisma as an overall, like, personality, confidence kind of thing, as well as looks, you know? If you've got a high charisma, you might be beautiful. And, you know, people... But I suppose it kind of depends. Like, you could have a high charisma score and describe it one way or another. I've seen some systems that have both, like I think the hero system we were playing had like a physical beauty stat as well as like more of a personality stat. All right, anyways. We'd like to talk to you, Mr. Vitteler. She indicated the actors who were dismantling the set and staying well out of her way, and added in a conspiratorial whisper, somewhere private. Dear lady, but of a certain, he said, currently I have lodgings in yonder esteemed watering hole. The witches looked around. Eventually, Magrat risked, You mean in the pub? It was cold and draughty in the great hall of Lancre Castle, and the new chamberlain's bladder wasn't getting any younger. He stood and squirmed under the gaze of Lady Felmet. Oh, yes, he said. We've got them all right. Lots. And people don't do anything about them, said the Duchess. The Chamberlain blinked. I'm sorry, he said. People tolerate them? Oh, indeed, said the Chamberlain happily. It's considered good luck to have a witch living in your village. My word, yes. Why? The Chamberlain hesitated. The last time he had resorted to a witch, it had been because certain rectal problems had turned the privy into a daily torture chamber, and the jar of ointment she had prepared had turned the world into a nicer place. They smooth out life's little humps and bumps, he said. How diplomatic. Parma says, oh my. Where I come from, we don't allow witches, said the Duchess sternly. And we don't propose to allow them here. You will furnish us with their addresses. Addresses, ladyship? Where they live. I trust your tax-gatherers know where to find them. Ah, said the Chamberlain miserably. The Duke leaned forward on his throne. I trust, he said, that they do pay taxes. Not exactly pay taxes, my lord, said the Chamberlain. There was silence. Finally, the Duke prompted, Go on, man. Well, it's more that they don't pay, you see. We never felt... That is, the old king didn't think... Well, they just don't. The Duke laid a hand on his wife's arm. I see, he said coldly. Very well. You may go. The Chamberlain gave him a brief nod of relief and scuttled crabwise from the hall. Whoop, 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 whoop. Sharky say, that couldn't have gone better. Well, said the Duchess. Indeed. That was how your family used to run a kingdom, was it? You had a positive duty to kill your cousin. It was clearly in the interests of the species, said the Duchess. The weak don't deserve to survive. The Duke shivered. She would keep on reminding him. He didn't, on the whole, object to killing people, or at least ordering them to be killed and then watching it happen. But killing a kinsman rather stuck in the throat, or, he recalled, the liver. Quite so, he managed. Of course, there would appear to be many witches, and it might be difficult to find the 3 that were on the moor. That doesn't matter. Of course not. Put matters in hand. Yes, my love. Matters in hand. He'd put matters in hand, all right. If he closed his eyes, he could see the body tumbling down the steps. Had there been a hiss of shocked breath down in the darkness of the hall? He'd been certain they were alone. Matters in hand. He'd tried to wash the blood off his hand. If he could wash the blood off, he told himself, it wouldn't have happened. He'd scrubbed and scrubbed. Scrubbed till he screamed. It's 8:28, 8:29. Oof, the next bit goes on for a few pages. Like 8 more pages. So why don't we call it there if everybody likes? I mean, I could keep going. It is Friday night. Farmos has an exam tomorrow. I don't know. What does everyone think? Farmos is quite sore as well. Sharkies agree? Okay. Let's call it there. That was entertaining. Been to see a play. Parts of that were a little difficult to follow. Not impossible to follow, just like... I don't know.
face savaged by a mustache. Pharma says parts of that were painful. Yes, as we're all folks who have been involved in the theater at one point or another, which I think lends it an extra bit of pain. Pain. Lots of pain. Yeah. I don't even know what I would do. What would you do if you were on stage and that was happening in the audience? It's Mister's night to put the kids to bed, so he's reading Fellowship of the Ring tonight. Ooh, looking forward to reading more than a few pages. That's exciting. All right, well, let's wrap up here then. If it were me, though, if I were on the stage and all that chatter was happening in the audience, that'd be tough. Because it's not heckling. Heckling is something else. Pharma says, I think it depends on the play. If it's a comedy, you might be able to play it off a bit, but a drama? Yeah, that's tricky. I've always had good audiences. There were one or two bits where like somebody was speaking in the audience, but I don't think anything malicious. It was more like, I don't know. Sharky say if it's comedy, you could break the fourth wall. You could, as long as you trusted the rest of the actors. I remember when we did Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and there was the part where I stabbed the player, and I remember someone in the audience going like, and that was very gratifying. Like, someone actually was shocked by what had just occurred on stage. You can't fake death. Which is a little bit of what we just went through. But yeah, I remember someone in the audience, like, when at that moment, at the thrust, someone going like, love to see us perform it again. That would be a tall order. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, but that would be not a small amount of work. We didn't have a recording of it either, did we? Because we had to get rights and things, says Farmhouse. Yeah, I remembered that very specifically with Three Musketeers. Three Musketeers, they were like very, no recordings. But I still wish that we had a personal recording, like a personal just for us to watch sort of thing. That was a very fun play. And I was so sick the night of. I had to shout all my lines because I was losing my voice. Under the lights on the stage, you could still see my breath steaming because I was burning up. Mr. remembers the big unanimous "aw" from the audience when you said I thought it would. Oh yeah, I thought it would make you happy. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely got some good audience reactions from that one. I remember Maestro Guidobaldo, who I've always thought is kind of notoriously grouchy, coming up afterwards and being like, this is my favorite play and I thoroughly enjoyed your production of it. That was very flattering. Which was funny because there's a point where I had a line that was like, you have to acknowledge, you are going to die. And I remember at that part, I didn't know prior that this was his favorite play, but he was right up front. And so I looked at him in the audience and I like pointed at him and you are going to die. So that was fun. Misses would be fun to see them play something else together too. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've been able to perform in anything on stage. Did a few stunts for TV. Got killed a couple of times on. It's the only thing, yeah. But it's been quite a long time. What was the last thing I did on stage? I hope it was it that terrible version of Star Wars that we did. I say it just I don't know. It was just awkward and kind of embarrassing that one to do because we were doing it for the SCA crowd, but it's like it's Star Wars. There was a play like a screen, sort of a take on Star Wars as a play, but it wasn't. I think really meant to be performed. I think it was more of kind of a joke. Yeah, Farm was saying the same thing. Um, and it was sort of awkward. Farmos was R2D2 and I was C3PO. Our parts weren't so bad, but there were some awkward other bits. Mr. Sharky's last thing was being Scrooge in an adaptation of A Christmas Carol. That's a great role. Nearly 10 years ago. Yeah, it's been quite a while, huh? Yeah, same for me. What was the last good play that we did? Like, what was the last thing before the Star Wars thing? Was it Three Musketeers, or was there something after that? There was something after that, wasn't there? Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead was like the last proper press gang play? You have a recording of it? Oh, that's great. Yeah, that would be a really good role. That'd be fun. Wow. How about that? Oh, crick. Yeah, I guess I haven't really done anything on stage since then. Three Musketeers was before then. All right. Well, I'm a little peckish. It's nearly 8:40, so I think it's time to wrap things up. I don't see anyone on my list of followed channels that's streaming right now. I guess everybody's taking a night off. So have a lovely weekend, everyone. I'll be running D&D tomorrow, and then a bit of downtime for a couple days after that, thankfully, because it's been a very busy couple of weeks. Though I am going to try and get to Kung Fu on Tuesday, because it's been nearly a month since I've been able to go, because every Tuesday and Thursday there's been something going on that has prevented me from being able to go. Good night and have fun with D&D. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend. And yeah, we'll continue Wyrd Sisters next Wednesday. I don't think there's anything in the... I'm going to take a quick look at the calendar. Let's see. Next Wednesday is the 27th. I know we're seeing a play on the 28th, but next Wednesday should be fine. Friday the 29th. I'll have to look at that as we get closer to. And then after that, we're into May. Getting close to the end of the month already. All right. Have a good night, everyone. See you next week. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.